We made fun of it, but I kind of miss it.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted him to be like, a lot of football left to play. Let's ride. Broncos country, let's ride.
They also coming off a loss too, so they get this win versus Chargers, then he'll be doing it again.
I will say this, I get it. Russell's a little cornball, right? And he signed the big contract, and he was bad last year, and the whole thing, and more bathrooms in his house than touchdown passes. I get all that. I kind of like Russell Wilson. I've met him once. I thought he was a legitimately nice dude. When I did meet him, I haven't heard anything bad about him as a person. You know what I mean? Like, by all accounts, he's a good teammate. Like, he's a good. I don't know.
He's just a little weird.
Well, that's the thing. We don't actually know him.
We don't.
So for people to I'm just different. Like, why would anybody just dislike the man because he say he Mr. Unlimited?
Right.
Not something I do.
Right.
But hey, you?
I like that with the Russ songs. It just seems like he's humbled.
Yeah,
he's
a little
humbled
bit.
by last year, and there's no garbage this year. There's no self-inflation or anything. He's just going out doing his job, playing quarterback at a very solid level. For sure. Good for you, Russ.
Where's your? Yeah, I miss your sweatshirt with a picture of somebody that looks about 20% of Russell Wilson.
I think that sweatshirt jinxed them last game because they had every chance to win that game.
It feels like a voodoo doll. Yeah, they really should have won that game. They should be 7-5 on a 6-game winning streak at that point. But now he has a very favorable matchup, Connor, against the Chargers.
He does, against the Chargers. And the thing with Russ this year, Jay, is that he's been running again. And he's not airing the ball out. They're not letting him air the ball out. But that running, at times, has made an effective fantasy quarterback this year.
Well, this is the thing that made him so special in Seattle. It was, one, the ability to throw the deep ball, and two, just the ability to take off and just break the spirit of defenses the way Mahomes and Allen do now, where it's like you've got these guys dead to rights on 3rd and 10, and then Russ takes off. So he's doing a bit more of that. He's making some amazing touchdown throws. Think of that one. Think of the Cortland Sutton one against the Bills. And now he goes against the Chargers defense, where I haven't looked at the numbers on this, but I would make the case that the Chargers defense is the worst defense in NFL history to shut a team out, as they did last week against the Patriots. So a very favorable matchup for Russ this weekend against a suspect Chargers pass there that's still missing Joey Bosa.
You see it right there. He's at the top of my second. I have a QB 11 this week, so as a top 12 play, as a low-end QB1, to your point about the matchup with the Chargers, LA has allowed the 5th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season, and it's Brandon Staley's another guy. We were talking in the break about which coaches in the NFL have gotten the less out of the most amount of talent, and Staley's on the list.
He's had a below-average defense every single year at the Chargers. And it's not like that team is devoid of talent, and it's not like he hasn't had time to build the defense if he didn't like the talent.
It's exactly. Brandon Staley for Ron Rivera. Who says no? America. Anyway, the fact is, to your point about Russell Wilson, the legs have started to get going. At least 30 rushing yards in 4 of the past 5 games. He's now scored a rushing touchdown in back-to-back games as well. Oh, and it's weird, for years in Seattle, it was always let Russ cook, and they wouldn't. But by the way, on keeping, this isn't the right phrasing of it, but in keeping him in check somewhat, or a leash, and not letting Russ cook, he was very efficient, very effective, and the Seahawks won a lot of games, including a Super Bowl. So now, last year in Denver, Nathaniel Hackett sort of lets him cook and didn't go great. No. But what Sean Payton has done is once again said, I'm going to rein it back. We're going to try to be we're going to pick our spots. But by the way, when they pick their spots, again, highly efficient. They're starting to run the ball. They, with Russell Wilson, and so, in a matchup with the Chargers, again, he's more to me. Russell Wilson is more of a floor play than a upside play. Right. But I think he's a top 12 guy this week.
Yeah, very simple. Jay, you mentioned the Chargers might be the worst defense. They're the second worst pass defense in football, so that helps to their passing game. If you just look at some of the recent quarterbacks they went against, Lamar was only quarterback 14 against them, but Jordan Love, QB9, Goff was QB8. The 2 games before that, they had the great fortune of playing against Zach Wilson and Tyson Bagent. We're not even going to count Bailey Zappi in the Patriots offense there. So just seeing these quarterbacks have success against the Chargers, so I'm keeping it open as well.
Even with games against Bailey Zappi and Tyson Bagent, they've given up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks.
That's what makes it crazy.
The thing, right? Yeah.
And Russ in his own right, he's been quarterback 13 the past 4 weeks. because of rushing for 44 last week. He'll throw the touchdown pass here and there. So even in his own right, like, you like him as a borderline quarterback one play.
This is the problem with, like, just team defensive rankings, is that it's just very hard in your mind to adjust for opponent. Like, the Jags had an elite statistical defense going into the Bengals game, but they haven't done it against anyone. Like, the one time they played a really good offense, San Francisco completely lit them up. And so I think with the Chargers as well, statistically they might look somewhat okay in some measures, but they're not very good. And I think Russ will light them up.
All right, so to keep it open on Russ, our next one here, Bree Hall, he comes in.
Oh, yeah, I'm keeping it open. Sorry, I forgot that was the premise of the bet. Sorry, yeah, I'm keeping it open. Yeah.
Our next one, Bree Hall. It's been a tough go for Bree Hall. This team cannot run the football. But at the same time here, Lawrence, for Brees, with the bad quarterback play the Jets have gotten, he's been able to get a lot of check down passes, which is
Brett Rippon's coming to save the day.
Yes.
Brett Rippon is coming to save the day. He's on the active
Who's starting
roster.
for quarterback of the Jets this Sunday?
Feels like reluctant Zach Wilson is starting for the Jets.
Which is
We'll probably find out at some point of the show.
Probably their best option. But, yeah, it ain't been going good for Brees Hall. He's averaged 28 rushing yards the past 7 games. Like, that's crazy. Now going against Houston, who's the 9th best run defense. Brees Hall was ranked RB 21 last week against Atlanta's 15th ranked rush defense. So I do have him at running back 21 this week, but keeping it open because he's averaged 6 catches the past 3 games. Like, that's literally how the Jets is moving the football right now, is throwing it to Brees Hall in the flat. So I'll keep it open, and you just gotta, hope for the best. I gotta start him in some leagues myself. He's in my flex spot, and that's pretty much what he is right now.
Yeah, I think just the volume of work. I'm going to keep it open on Brees Hall reluctantly, but I think the positives here are his passing game usage, right? Again, they can't, because of whether it's Tim Boyle or Trevor Siemian and maybe back to Zach Wilson, like, they're not throwing the ball deep, and especially the last couple of weeks they just haven't, right? And so, because they don't have anyone other than Garrett Wilson. And so when you double Garrett Wilson, you're just sort of like, okay, Tyler Conklin, is he out there somewhere or whatever? I mean, and Jeremy Ruckert. Like, the fact is that Brees Hall has at least 5 receptions in 3 straight games. He's had a 20% target share in each one of those games. And this Texans defense, that is an area to attack. They've allowed at least 5 receptions to running backs in back-to-back games. And so just Brees Hall's talent, his involvement in the passing game gives him a floor there. He's always a threat to break a long one as well. I'm at running back 20. Not great. Only 2 teams on a bye, basically, Brian Robinson and James Conner in terms of running backs that are out this week. But I'm keeping it open, reluctantly keeping it open. Much like Zach Wilson. And starting this week, I'm reluctantly keeping it open on Brees Hall.
Yeah. Is the conventional wisdom there kind of that Zach kind of made a comment to a teammate like, I'm not coming back to this team because I'll just get hurt behind this line or whatever, and then it kind of just took on a life.
Like a game of telephone. It's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah.
And,
I think the thing is with Brees Hall.
By the way, it could also just, sorry to interrupt you for a second, but that also could have been like, not to like, I just think Zach Wilson, who has not played well in his NFL career, but I think he's gotten a bad rap. I mean, I think he hasn't been surrounded by weapons. He hasn't been helped by his coaching staff. He hasn't been helped by the media or his teammates. I think he's been put into some tough situations, whether it was, as a rookie in New York with literally no one around him. And then, oh, by the way, here comes Aaron Rodgers, our savior. And
that's gone in
4
plays.
That's gone, and a team is built. Everything is built towards Aaron Rodgers and what he does well. And then all of a sudden here, Zach Wilson, you got to take over Aaron Rodgers' team, the coaching staff, the perimeter players. Like, if Zach Wilson had a choice, I bet you he's not taking Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard. I feel bad for Zach Wilson. And I wonder if his take was, just to go to that comment, I wonder if it was sort of like, I'm not coming back here. Meaning, like, he's like, he knows that, like, at the end of the season, maybe the Jets are going to move on from him, or he's going to move on from the Jets or whatever. Fresh start somewhere new, like it just hasn't worked. I wonder if that, and then
I don't
he's
blame
been benched 3 times.
Yeah. He's been benched 3 times, right? Like he knows that, like, it just point whatever fingers you want, but it hasn't worked out for Zach Wilson in New York, and he's probably better off, as is the organization, and kind of a clean start both ways, right?
Yeah, I agree, and I think
so I wonder if that's the comment he meant more about.
I feel like it kind of took on a life of its own. And that's what happens when reports come out like that are worded a certain way, but you don't know the exact detail of the situation.
Yep. Yeah. But as far as this game goes, I think like Zach Wilson to me is a significant upgrade over Tim Boyle, because the thing with Zach is that Zach has good plays and he has really bad plays, and the bad plays have outweighed the good plays. Tim Boyle just has bad plays. There's no variance. There's no upside. Like watching them against the Falcons, it's like you've got no chance whatsoever to move the ball. At least Zach can do stuff. Like he can move around, he can throw it deep. I think just
Zach has at least an arm.
Yeah, he has an arm.
Like Zach can at least throw. Like
Tim Wilson was open last week.
Man,
Tim Boyle wouldn't throw it.
Garrett
Wilson was open a lot.
The interception that Tim Boyle threw
to Jesse Bates.
I don't know if it's because I seen it in person, but man.
Yeah, it was a tough
Did it make your daughter cry?
Almost.
Almost, yeah.
Almost. It almost made me cry.
Yeah.
The past 2 weeks for the Jets, the offense has just been a farce. Under Zach Wilson, it's not a farce. Like, it's a real NFL offense. It's just a bad one. But at least it is real.
For sure.
And so I think that with Bree Hall, I think just having a real quarterback again will help him a lot. And I know me and you feel differently about this, Connor, and we'll get to it in the last call, but I think the Jets are very live in this game, because I think that the Texans are banged up, no Tank Dell. They're banged up on the offensive line. Stroud quietly hasn't really performed. He hasn't had that many games against great defenses. And I think the Jets might have the best defense in football. So I think it's going to be close enough where Bree Hall will have a game script where he can run in a game where there's going to be lots of rain and wind too, which will help the run.
Any, just while we're on the subject of the Jets, any texts from Robert Saleh you'd like to share?
I am not one of the New York personalities that gives Robert Saleh the 6-step plan of how he should fix this team.
What about Fireman Ed? You got the.
I've drank his beer.
There you go.
That was one of the, like, for people who are not aware, like, there's a local radio host in New York City who just
retired. He's not even
retired,
active.
right? Where he does a podcast, and he claims he had a text exchange with Robert Saleh, and like it just, and then revealed the content of the text exchange, and then apparently got it wrong, and then had to, anyway, I don't know.
It was messy.
It was very messy. It was just really, that was a bad one.
Can't imagine why nobody wants to come coach in New York. Really wild.
Yeah. Robert Saleh, it'd be interesting to see what happens with Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh's a really good football coach.
He's
a really good football coach.
Look at the defense he built. He came here to build the defense.
You see the defense.
It's, like Jay said, it could be. You could argue it's the best defense.
I think it's them.
Young defense too.
If the Jets move on to the Commanders, I'd be totally fine if Robert Saleh came to coach.
You keep lobbying for different coaches.
What?
Brandon Staley.
I don't want Brandon Staley.
You'd rather have him than Ron Rivera, though.
Oh, I want. Yes, obviously. I'll tell you.
What's the line? The coaching line.
Would you rather have Arthur Smith?
There you go. There's the coaching line.
Or Ron Rivera.
The Jeff Fisher line. Jeff Fisher, because Jeff Fisher's the definition of mediocrity.
Yes,
so
right.
He's the Jeff Fisher line.
No, I'm saying, like, I think there will be a coaching change in Washington, and who do I want as my head coach in Washington? And so, there's been some Belichick rumors of all things, but here's if Robert Saleh moves on from the Jets, that there's a parting of the ways. I'd be all in on Saleh for the Commanders.
Ben Johnson.
That was the other guy. That's what I was going to say. Those are the two. I think Ben Johnson will be the hottest candidate. Ben Johnson and Jim Harbaugh, because I don't think he's coming back to Michigan. Yeah. I think those will be two of the hotter NFL coaching candidates.
So Zach Wilson must be starting, because the update now just says Trevor Siemian will be quarterback 2.
Oh, wow.
Brett Rippon is the
I
emergency
see it's Fantasy
quarterback.
Life app release. Nice, look at you. Yeah.
And Tim Boyle is no longer on the roster.
Well, they cut him.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
I
told you we would get it during the show.
So now
Fantasy
that
Life
Zach
app
Wilson
alert.
is starting.
Fantasy Life app alert. Got it right there. Breaking: Jets quarterback Zach Wilson is back. He will start on Sunday against the Texans. That's Connor Hughes.
Let's go, Zach.
He stormed into Robert Saleh's office and said, "I want the ball."
Yeah, I want the ball.
Let's go.
We're gonna stop talking about the Jets. America's gonna stop talking about the Jets.
People that are listening to this fantasy show are like, "How do we spend so much time on the Jets, who scored about 4 points?"
Anyway, Devin Singletary. Let's talk about Devin Singletary.
Yeah, same game.
Who's playing the Jets?
Who is playing the Jets?
Playing the Jets. Can't get away from them.
Motor Singletary right now. Listen here, Barry, comes in as RB36 for you. I think that's safe to say that is a close in this segment.
You're not just good looks, Connor. You have a brain. You're correct. It is, in fact, a close it out for me on Devin Singletary. A lot of concerns, right? Lack of the passing game usage. He's got one game this year with more than 2 receptions. He's had under 40 rushing yards in both games since Dameon Pierce has returned. You see it there on your screen as well. He had an 81% snap rate in Week 12, 44% last week. Pierce got all the touches inside the 5-yard line. Since Dameon Pierce has been back, he's averaging just 10 touches a game. And so 10 touches a game against this Jets defense. And yes, it's easier to run on the Jets than it is to pass. But still, Singletary hasn't shown a ton of explosiveness as well. It's a coin flip as to who gets the touchdown. my running back 36 this week in a week where there's only 2 teams on a bye.
What is he coming for you?
Yeah, I got him at 30, but I'm closing it out as well. It seems like it's just tilting back in Damian Pierce's favor. We see the touches right here, 15-9 in week 13. So, like Matthew said, it's a toss-up, and you don't even want to get into that, especially when you're going up against this Jets defenses. On that offense now, it's crazy because it used to seem like you could start anybody on that offense. Now it's Nico Collins or bust outside of C.J. Stroud, maybe Dalton Schultz, but Nico Collins or bust for that Texans offense.
Yep. Seems like the Jets had some shaky moments a little bit with their run defense, but Atlanta couldn't do anything on the ground against them. And Atlanta have a great run game with Bijan and Algier and that offensive line. So, yeah, closing out on Devin Singletary.
Our next one here, Gus Edwards against the Rams. I mean, Jay, with Gus right now, 12 or fewer touches in 3 of his past 4 games. We've seen this offense start to go a little bit to Keaton Mitchell. We've obviously seen them used through the air as well. We've talked about with Gus, it felt like he's very touchdown reliant. How do you stand on him in terms of starting him with knowing that?
Not great. I think this is Keaton Mitchell's backfield more so now, just given his talent and what he adds to just the dynamism, particularly with Mark Andrews gone. They just need more explosiveness. I will say, though, that there's going to be a lot of rain, going to be a lot of wind, and you just know that Gus is going to get a couple of goal line carries. So he's touchdown dependent, but he's every chance to get in the end zone.
I'm closing it out on Gus Edwards. He's my running back 34. You were absolutely correct. So you think back to week 12, last time we saw them. Keaton Mitchell out snapping Edwards 32-18 in games in which he doesn't score a touchdown. That's the point, is he has to score. Because when he does not score, he's averaging 5.5 fantasy points per game. Like he's not involved in the passing game at all. When he scores a touchdown, he averages over 18 fantasy points per game. So it's just a little bit of how lucky do you feel? Do you think against the Rams he falls into the end zone? Because he has 3 games this year, literally only 3 games this year with more than 62 yards from scrimmage. So it's been very touchdown dependent. And with Keaton Mitchell, with Lamar, I feel like Lamar is due for some positive touchdown regression on the ground. We haven't seen Lamar score the kind of rushing touchdowns that he normally does. So I'm closing it out on Gus Edwards. Lawrence, you're Mr. Baltimore. You love the Ravens.
I'm going to close it out on Gus as well. I got him at running back 35, Matthew. Week 12 was the second time this season not leading the running backs and carries. The other time was week 9 to who? Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell snapped. I feel like Keaton Mitchell would have been in a bigger role, but it's the injuries that kind of held him back, so they got to keep bringing him along slowly. But you see the snap share for him increase in the last 4 weeks from 18 to 24 to 36 to 46%. So you could see that topping out somewhere in the 50 to 60% range. And if they have him on the field more now, more than just, hey, we giving you the ball. Now he's on the field in every type of situation, even at the goal line as well. But you know if they get inside the 5, if you're starting Gus Edwards, that's your time to shine. But you have to sweat that out. That's why I'm closing it out. We both have Keaton Mitchell ranked a little bit higher.
A little bit more context on Zach Wilson. He will start the rest of the season. I'm telling you guys, we cannot escape the Jets news on this show.
Yeah.
Robert Saleh on Zach Wilson starting. He's fired up. He's excited to get this opportunity. Said he's the starter the rest of the season. God willing. Lawrence, it sounds like you. What? God willing.
God willing. Like, what does that even mean? Like, is he going to start for the rest of the season or not? Because if he does, we at least know he's starting.
So Aaron Rodgers definitely not coming back. Sorry, Aaron.
Yeah,
I know you're a medical miracle. You've been working your ass up to come back, but sorry, we promised it to Zach Wilson.
Wasn't that your fantasy team name in our show?
It started off as DPJ. Lord willing.
Yeah, Lord willing.
Because it was all about Donovan Peoples-Jones, where he at right now. And then once that didn't happen, I had to change it to Lamar, Lord willing. So, now it's going to be Zach Wilson, Lord willing.
The vision of Aaron Rodgers at practice was like an SNL skit. Like, he just dragging his leg, he can't move.
Yeah.
Which is what happens when you're 4 months removed from
in a hoodie, just throw in.
Yeah,
great showman, though, because he had people thinking that's really going to happen. Got people talking about that.
Listen, in the last segment, Who's Eating Good, we talked a lot about Geno Smith and how these running backs are hurt, Lawrence. He might have to throw more. Where does Tyler Lockett rank for you, knowing that coming into this game?
Wide receiver 27, and I'm actually going to keep it open. He's actually been wide receiver 27 on a points-per-game basis the last 4 weeks, and in those last 4 weeks, he's got the same amount of targets as DK Metcalf and more than JSN at 16. The thing about the 49ers earlier, we talked about this. The Seahawks here, 10.5-point underdogs, and the 49ers have allowed either a touchdown or 100 receiving yards to a receiver in 3 of their past 4 games. So there is something to be had there if the game goes how you think. But I think it'll be a little more competitive. But I like Lockett this week for what it's worth.
You mentioned the targets, right? 8 targets in 4 of the past 6. So you mentioned that, right? Okay. Well, when he sees 8 targets, he's averaging over 17 fantasy points per game. We talked about Geno Smith being a 10.5-point underdog. The running backs are banged up. We think Geno's going to have to throw. And so if he's throwing, Tyler Lockett's obviously going to be one of the guys he throws to. Again, when he gets 8 targets, he averages over 17 fantasy points per game. I'm keeping it open. I'm at wide receiver 24, slightly higher than Lawrence.
Yeah, and I think his stat line against Dallas was a little bit misleading. He had an uncharacteristic drop. He could have had a better game in that one.
For sure.
Our next pass catcher here, Jay, Adam Thielen against the Saints. He comes in as wide receiver 29 for Barry. I actually thought Bryce Young played a little bit better last week despite Carolina losing, but we've not seen a lot for Thielen in recent weeks.
No, it was more of just a functional offense.
Yes.
Now they're going up against the Tampa Bay pass defense, which is basically allows you to run a functional offense because it's not very good, also missing a lot of their players in that one. But I would be closing it out on Thielen reluctantly. I said last week when we talked about him that no, it was just the one game. It was just one bad game. Well, now it's 2 bad games.
Right.
And he's had 27 receiving yards over the past 2 weeks. And this kind of feels like the Jonathan Mingo show now, Lawrence.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna close it out on him. I have him a little lower than Matthew at 33. He's wide receiver 41 since week 8, despite being a top 7 receiver in the first 7 weeks. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 5. He hasn't scored. He scored in 4 of his. God damn it! He scored in 4 of his first 6 games.
Lord willing.
And since his 6th game, he haven't scored a damn touchdown. And like you said, it's the Jonathan Mingo show. He had a 32% target share in week 13.
Since week 8, to your point about the lack of scoring, since week 8, he's the 48th best wide receiver in fantasy football on a points per game basis. 9 targets the last 2 weeks as Frank Reich has moved on from this team, and they're a slightly different offensive set here playing the Saints. Normally they're bad against the slot, but I will say this. They're playing better defense since week 10. They allow the fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Teams can actually run on New Orleans these days, so I think you see a lot of Chuba Hubbard. You see some Jonathan Mingo. He's my wide receiver 29 this week, Adam Thielen is, but I'm closing it out just like you guys are.
Our last one here, Matthew. Deontay Johnson on the short week against the Patriots. He has 4 straight games with 50 or fewer yards, and guess what? It's the Maserati, what do we call him, the Mazda Mitch show, whatever you want to say about Mitch Trubisky.
Mitsubishi.
There we go.
Mitsubishi. That's very hard to say.
Either way, Deontay Johnson hasn't had a lot of production, and now he's got Mitch Trubisky to deal with. The Patriots, for as much as they struggle on offense, they play pretty good defense. Since week 10, they're the #1 defense in terms of scoring, in terms of fewest points allowed in NFL games, 4 or fewer receptions each of the last 4 games, with a 44% catch rate for Deontay Johnson, again, over the last 4. And so in a game in where the over-under is literally 30, it's hard to get excited about Deontay Johnson here. He's just my wide receiver 39. I think you're probably still starting the running backs in this game. We'll talk about this more tomorrow as we preview that game because we have to. We're legally required to. But, yeah, I think you're not excited about the prospects of Deontay Johnson on Thursday night.
Yes. Suspect the Mitsubishi may stall out in this one.
I see what you did there.
Yes. And we'll see what happens with Najee Harris because he is under an injury cloud. If there's no Najee, maybe they have to throw the ball more because Jalen Warren just hasn't had a workhorse workload in the past. But Mitch Trubisky is not very inspiring in this one.
I have him ranked way higher than Matthew's 39 at 37. Okay. I'm closing it out.
Okay, fair enough.
Why do
you love Deontay Johnson?
I love him.
You love
wide receiver 37.
He's your new Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yes, sir. In that 30 over/under game.
Let's recap. Matthews, keep it open or close it out. Rankings here. Russell Wilson at QB 11. That's an open. Breece Hall, RB 20, open. Devin Singletary and the Gus Bus. They are both a close. RB 36 for Motor. RB 34 for the Gus Bus. Tyler Lockett stays open. He's wide receiver 24 against the Niners this weekend. Adam Thielen is a close at wide receiver 29 against the Saints. Deontay Johnson on the short week against New England, wide receiver 39. That's a close.
Yep. Just want to point out, by the way, one last thing to wrap up the segment. While we were all talking about Zach Wilson and the Jets, backup producer Pete picked up Zach Wilson in our show league, just so you know.
We called him Zach Wilson before.
I mean, I'm just, there you go, Pete, there you go. Pete, enjoy the Zach Wilson experience.
Yeah.
In our show.
It's a lot of fun.
Backup producer Pete. It's when you don't have to work on the show and you can just sit there and, you know.
Play the waiver wire.
Play the waiver wire.
Open waiver wire.
Yeah, just stare.
We're taking one more break.
It's going to be Pete, apparently.
When we're back, it's the last call.
Must be nice.
Find out which sides and totals we've circled for Week
14.
14. We each picked one. Coming up right after this.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.